In 2019, China was ranked 106 out of 153 countries in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Inequality ranking, having dropped 6 places since 2017. This raises the question of the place of women in the country and even more so if they can be feminists in China. In this video, we define feminism as activism and organizing for women's rights in the country, and feminists as those who partake in said activism and organizing. So when considering this subject, taking into account China's political history and the CCP's solid hold on seemingly all aspects of civil society, we were led to the following problematic. Is feminist activism possible in the current Chinese context? In other words, does China allow for feminist movements to exist and succeed? To answer that question, we'll first examine womanhood, its image in China, and the opportunities afforded to women from the second part of the 20th century through the Mao era until today. Then we'll take a look at contemporary feminism, so feminist activism in China, by examining its modes of action, government repression, and the role of the diaspora in organizing. Then, let's start with the first part about womanhood in China, a chronology of expectations.
To begin with, let's take a look at the Mao era, or the celebration of gender equality through communism. Before 1949, women were essentially considered as mothers and wives, which was in line with traditional Chinese values. During the early communist era, the Chinese government publicly celebrated gender equality, and China had one of the biggest female workforces in the world. This state feminism is well illustrated by one quote of Mao's, when he said that women hold up half the sky. Mao also insisted that whatever men comrades can accomplish, women comrades can too. Researcher Yun Zhao highlights, in this sense, the existence of different constructions of womanhood. For example, Nu Xing, or the modern woman, and Fu Nu, a Maoist construction which has strong associations with revolutionary women who work. She highlights that womanhood in China has been constructed and represented in a variety of ways, depending in large part on the needs of the CCP and its primary objective, which is to maintain power. Mao propelled women to equality with men, passed laws to protect their interests, including outlawing polygamy and arranged marriages. In order to modernize China, there was a need for new narratives. Women were represented in this era as independent, literate, romantically and sexually liberated, and overall cut off from the traditional Chinese conception of womanhood. They were reconstructed as a key part of the revolution, which needed to forego family and private life in favor of communist organizing, in favor of the revolution. During the Mao era, gender equality and the idea of women as autonomous, liberated parts of the workforce were first and foremost tools to boost the nation's productivity. There was a shift in expectations due to a shift in state priorities.
In the second subpart, we are going to talk about the regression of gender equality in the post-Mao era until the election of Xi Jinping, which could actually be interpreted as a regression of gender equality dependent on economic reforms. As a matter of fact, in the 1990s, the gender inequalities deepened as China accelerated economic reforms, dismantling the party-mandated system of equal employment between women and men. Therefore, wage inequality continued to decrease between 1995 and 2007. The privatization of housing in China had also affected gender inequality in wealth, with women becoming shut out of the property deed. In addition, the new marriage law of 2011 has made the transfer of money primarily between the men in the family. Therefore, social pressure testifies to certain capitalist aspects that China has to develop in its post-socialist period and led to the rebirth of patriarchal values and the notion of competition. Indeed, this period is associated with the resurgence of Confucianism. It is a philosophical school established from the 6th century before Christ until 1911, instituting woman as being dependent on 3 men, the husband, the father, and the son. She must have 3 virtues, which are obedience, chastity, and the duty to bear a son. The Communist Party uses traditional values to its advantage to impose this vision. One of our classmates spoke on the subject.
If a woman who is not married or who is married without a child or who's married with a child, they are facing the different career pressure because the boss or the HR will consider that they may need to spend a lot of time to their children.
In that sense, Leta Hong Fisher argues that gender equality is enshrined in the country's constitution, but the government is denying these principles. Confucianism values as resurface in Chinese propaganda. They inspire policies that push women to return to their very traditional roles as mothers and housewives. This regression implies a strong social and family pressure. It makes it difficult to be a woman who wants to pursue one's non-traditional dreams, like the photographer Ye Fan, who has to leave China. The pressure from Ye Fan's parents was very strong, as they arranged appointments without her consent, for example. Taking this into account, we observe the development of a culture of fear with the image of leftover women, in Chinese Shengnu, which considers that women have an expiry date that they must marry quickly and birth a generation of workers. It follows the concept of Qiao, which is a filial piety. It argues that, thanks to obedience, devotion, and maternal instincts, women are necessary for the proper functioning of a home, family harmony, and consequently the stability of the nation and the economy. Finally, those elements led us to discuss the current period, which implied the coexistence of progress and backlash since the election of Xi Jinping in 2013. The idea that the main important thing is the survival at any cost of the man-dominant Communist Party led it to adopt aggressive propaganda against the old one-child policy by increasing the birth rates in order to keep power in an old aging population. It is for this reason that Xi Jinping particularly targets modern educated young women, which has been enforced since 2016. In that respect, feminists are accused of being linked with the hostile force, which is the West. The state surveillance of NGOs and feminist activists is increasing, and those who have tried to hold the government to account on human rights abuses have faced crackdowns. Also, some laws have been set up to control those NGOs in the aim to restrict forward funding. Regarding the condition of women, there was also a huge problem and a lack of transparency of the states about sexual harassment and domestic violence, which is actually one of the main issues that the feminist movement wants to combat. The fact that the first legislation against domestic violence was not adopted until December 2015 has a huge significance regarding the problem, which was kind of invisibilized for years. However, a certain paradox exists between these regressions of women's rights and at the same time timid advances by the states. An example of how progress and backlash can coexist is what happened after a well-publicized allegation of sexual abuse with the case of Xiao Tzu, who was sexually abused by her father. She had been given legal support from two women's rights groups, and by a combination of activism and manifestation, it led the government to punish her father. However, this case reflects more of a priority by the authorities of social stability than justice for the victim. Also, we don't have to consider the fate of women as homogeneous. And certain women are powerful in the business world, for instance, such as Tong Rijian, Wu Yaojin, or Lui Jungfan. Moreover, there is a great population of Chinese women graduates in China and abroad, but the general trend remains that of regression of gender equality in China, even more for young women.
Okay, so now that we saw the chronology of expectation of the womanhood in China, let's focus on the impact toward the government. How does the regime see feminism in China? Indeed, is it not surprising that feminism can be seen as a female threat regarding the government, especially now, thanks to the renewal of feminist activism, which exists through different modes of action. Of course, there are different feminist NGOs in China upon which women can rely on. However, feminism in China knows a turning point as it has gradually distanced from state and NGO feminism, which mostly remains under the state control. According to Sarah Liao, a professor in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, she defines it in the Asian Journal of Women's Studies as the other system feminism. Is it more a consciousness political feminism, where women from different ages found themselves in a collaborative feminism with shared conviction? This new generation of feminist activists use creative performances in order to denounce gender issues such as domestic violence, misogyny, and workplace sexism. In this video, we will present only 4 forms of action, but don't forget that there are way more. Okay, so the first one is the use of campaign. Indeed, one best example is the case of Zhao Meilei. She has worked on the domestic grandfathering campaign for an anti-sexual harassment ad at the Guangzhou subway station. She is also known for her notable campaigns of the feminist walk of 2,000 kilometers from Beijing to Guangzhou to raise awareness of sexual abuse in 2014. The second one is the use of mobilization. Here we can talk about the case of Lin Yan, an abused woman sentenced to death in 2011 for murdering her husband. Her sentence was broken in 2015 following a big movement of mobilization in the street by picky feminists in married dress smeared with red, and also young women robed themselves in white clothes to illustrate the helpless situation of domestic violence victims. The third one is the use of contemporary art. In general, art can be often linked with the expression of social issues. In China, we can refer here to 2 artists, Cao Fei and Lin Jianmiao, who critique the existent realities while establishing an expanded feminist position. As female artists, they have a special insight into the current situation for Chinese women. Lin Jianmiao's installation called Mothers, for example, present the complexity between the matriarchal archetype and the motherhood in China. Finally, the last mode of action is the role of social media. Indeed, the current network of feminists mainly rely on digital media and the internet for visibility, but also in order to fight indirectly the regime. For example, the NGO Feminist Voices thwarted internet censorship by not directly criticizing the CCP. Moreover, by attracting media attention to the movement, they reached 180,000 followers on China Weibo and 70,000 on WeChat, which is exceptional for China, even if in 2018 they were shut down by the government for posting sensitive and illegal information. Li Shuyu, a student from our classroom, during an interview actually testified about social media in China.
Social media provides a platform to express their own opinion and speeds up the processing of social issues. Feminists can use social media to make more people understand what they are looking for.
However, following this feminist activism, government repression can take place. This is what illustrates the feminist threat for the regime. The case of the Feminist 5 in 2015 is a good example. Indeed, Chinese authorities arrested and imprisoned 5 feminist activists who denounced sexual harassment on International Women's Rights Day. They were released after 37 days of detention for inciting quarrel and fomenting unrest. Wu Wang, one of the 5 feminists, was banned from leaving the country for 10 years because she was being investigated. It was thanks to a strong international mobilization that the Feminist 5 were released. For example, the NGO Amnesty International led the campaign Free the 5. We also have Hillary Clinton and Samantha Power who called for their release.
To fully understand Chinese feminist activism in our globalized world, we have to consider the Chinese feminist diaspora.
The Chinese government would consider us to be Western hostile forces or being controlled by Western hostile forces.
According to Shen Lu for China File, due to government repression and backlash against activists, many Chinese feminists choose to further the cause from abroad in countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada. Activists such as Liang Xiaowen are part of a group of Chinese feminists organizing in the United States. Thanks to the internet, they're able to share their efforts and ideas, and to support the efforts and ideas of activists in China. This is the case of the 2019 feminist movement winter camp in New York, which Shen Lu describes as an intimate workshop on gender roles, discrimination, and sexual assault. Over the course of 2 days, during which over 30 Chinese people, mostly women, discussed the Chinese Me Too movement, Skyped with activists still in China, and shared their experiences. Social media and the internet are key tools for the Chinese feminist diaspora, allowing them not only to keep touch with activists in China and to denounce inequality on social media, but also to record history in ways that are more difficult, if not impossible, for China-based feminists. Because they have free access to the internet, a group of activists abroad led by Liang have started to create Wikipedia articles about campaigns and events in China that are unavailable or likely to be censored on the Chinese internet. Overall, the Chinese feminist diaspora is comprised of activists who do not feel safe fighting for equality in their own country. But although they're abroad, their work has an impact in their country, and Chinese feminist activism does not only take place in China.
That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you found this video as interesting to watch as we found it to make, and please don't hesitate to check out our sources. Overall, the question of feminism in China is complex, layered, and globalized due to national repression and the internationalization of Chinese women's fight for equality. One thing is sure, Chinese feminist activism, even in the face of adversity, does not seem to be slowing down.